Oh, you're on mute, Patrick.
That is standard operating procedures to begin a meeting on Zoom. You have to have a false start before you start. Now that we've officially begun, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the land of the Lenape and Canarsie First Nations. And also would like to acknowledge that Brooklyn College we celebrate and acknowledge the West Indian and Afro-Caribbean heritage of the contemporary Flatbush community. My name is Patrick Sabongui, and I'm the new head of the BFA Acting Program at Brooklyn College. And I'm honored and ecstatic to be here today to celebrate the graduating class of 2020. This class has overcome obstacles that no other class has had to contend with, and they've risen above it like the phoenix, and now are ready to spread their wings and fly the coop and begin and launch their professional careers. So I'm honored to be here to begin this series of events in honor of their showcase. Congratulations to you all, and I cannot wait to see you on stage and on screen and to share the boards with you. Today's event is a panel with two outstanding artists. The panel will be moderated by our very own Graham Schmidt, who I have to give an extra sparkly shout out to for spearheading all of these events, for pulling all of this together, and for innovating and adapting to this new reality, and A+. Thank you so much, Graham, for your leadership and your creativity, putting these things together. Graham is a freelance director based in Brooklyn, New York, and we're also very lucky to have him on faculty in the BFA Acting Program at Brooklyn College. Our two distinguished guests for the day are Natasha Sinha, who's an off-Broadway producer and dramaturg, who in January of 2021 will step into the role of Associate Artistic Director at Playwrights Horizons. Shout out, Natasha, we're so honored to have you here. Our other guest is Victor Vazquez, who is the founder and CEO of X Casting in New York City. We're very lucky to have both of these guests here today to share their insights and their knowledge with our graduating class and with the rest of us. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to you, Graham. Thank you so much for giving me this time.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate your leadership and your support. This is a really special opportunity. Really, we're convening this panel partly because we recognize that among the great losses of this pandemic is that there are artists who were about to step into professional careers who suddenly were confronted with a really disorienting and frustrating reality. It feels it's hard to orient yourself in the current artistic ecosystem. So we're gathering people like Victor and Natasha, leaders in the field, to help us maybe gain some perspective. And just to let everybody who's watching know this, the students are in the room with us, and they'll be joining us in about 30-45 minutes so they can ask some questions. But first, I just wanted to say a little bit about our guests. And then I have a question for both of you. One, Natasha Sinha, whom I've been honored to know for a couple of years now, is a producer and dramaturg who's worked at Barrington Stage, LCT3, most recently Signature Theater, and also is the co-founder of the Beehive Dramaturgy Collective, as well as an activist. Somebody who I really look up to and I'm excited to be in community with. Victor Vazquez, in July of 2020, joined the TCG Rising Leaders of Color cohort, and on the strength of, in many ways, not just your work founding and being the CEO of X Casting New York City, but your background as a line producer and a casting director at Arena Stage, Pasadena Playhouse, and CTG before that. I wanted to ask both of you, one of the reasons we invited you is you both have this background in anti-racism work. X Casting New York City is distinguished from a lot of other companies because it's rooted in an anti-racist ethos and a personal story that you share on the website, Victor. And that's work that you've been doing for a long time. And then Natasha, I know that your work with a lot of, as a dramaturg on plays by Michael R. Jackson, Dave Harris, Antoinette Nwandu, you've targeted plays or you specialize in working with playwrights who are from underrepresented communities. As people that have been leaders in reimagining and thinking about anti-racism work, long before the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd this summer kind of caused this eruption of protest and brought it to the forefront of a lot of white leaders in America and in American theater. How has it felt to see this? How has it felt to see these issues come to the forefront over the last few months?
I can start, and Victor, feel free to jump in whenever. Yeah, I mean, I felt frustration and relief and wariness, I guess. I'm glad that these issues are coming to the forefront and that folks are having to prioritize it. It's also clear that this happened because folks are called out, not because they chose to do it proactively. So that's always sort of in the background, I think, for those of us who've been integrating that that focus into our artistic work, into what we're doing already. And so there's that. So I'm not going to say there's not that. That is definitely there. But in this push forward, I'm really interested to see what's going to stick once we're back into production, honestly. I think right now there's this moment, there's this pause, there's this like moment of, okay, we have to innovate digitally. We have to do all these other things because we can't do what we always do. We can't produce live theater in front of humans. So that sort of feels natural right now to think in that way. I'm really hoping that we hold on to that and keep prioritizing it as we move into whatever the next era is going to be in post-pandemic, whatever that is exactly, because I think it's going to be very easy to lapse into something where it falls down the list the way it always has before. So, I feel like I keep saying that out loud to people so that we don't do it. So I think it's really just like a thing of putting your finger on it and remembering to keep it as a priority. But the specifics of actually targeting what has been omitted, what has been like the folks who have been completely sidelined from the American mainstream theater canon. That's a huge problem. And now there are specific conversations towards it versus the sort of diversity conversations from before that would just sort of put the word diverse in everything and then call it solved. So I'm encouraged by the fact that there's more specificity now, but I am curious about when it moves more into interweaving those conversations with the actual art and the actual processes and actual artistic aesthetic.
Just like Natasha said, I share in that frustration. Anti-racism is not a checkbox that you could easily just say, check, done, next, right? It is a daily practice that is relegated to the minutia, sometimes in the small ways, and then sometimes in the big ways that cause the sort of impact and wave that we see after Black men and Black women are killed in this country, right? And so I think, I say that just because anti-racism is something that a lot of people have had to sort of add to their toolkit early on as we confront racism, as folks, confront a system that might be invisible, but is meant to keep you out, right? And so for me, in terms of casting, that system was very clear to me when I started working as a casting director here in New York City. And I started asking the question, where are the casting directors of color? And it was a question that not many people were asking, and I felt like people didn't know how to answer my question, even though I feel it was a very valid and fair one. And it was when I started asking 4 years ago, when I moved here from Los Angeles. And the statistics, just to share with the folks listening in, there are about 100 casting directors. Sorry, there's a whistle. Got it. There's about 100 casting directors in New York City that are members of the Casting Society of America, the CSA. And within that sort of membership, right, we have associates and we have casting directors. We have very few casting associates who are Black or POC. We have even fewer casting directors who are Black or POC. It falls into the handful of numbers versus 100, right? So when we're looking at the percentage, there is no real count because the CSA doesn't keep count of how casting directors identify. But if you ask most people who work in theater, you could name them in one hand. And so even that alone for me is a barrier, right? To be a casting director yields great power and great responsibility because you are serving as a gatekeeper for many projects that have the capacity to engage the imagination of the world on a global scale, on a global market, not just in New York theater, but in TV, in film, in the commercial space, even the books that you listen to on audiobooks, right? This is all casting. And so for me, it became a huge problem when I started asking the question and I was not getting an answer. And for me, it was already there. There was almost like an erasure of the confrontation of racism, meaning like that folks weren't even looking at it as if it was a problem. And that for me is the aggravation and the frustration where for some of us, we're looking around, we're like, this is a problem. And meanwhile, most people are like, no, it's not. What are you talking? It's only a problem to you, right? It's the way you're interpreting it. And so now I'm glad that we have shared language to talk about these things. I'm glad that we have a shared vocabulary and that the word racism is being dissected in a lot of ways. But in a lot of ways, it's like, great, welcome to this part of the conversation. You have a lot of catching up to do. Let's go, right? And so for me as a casting director, it was a no-brainer when I started my company a year ago that it was a company rooted in anti-racism. Like it was my mission since the beginning because I knew that the only way that I could exist within this industry is if I kept it core to my mission and that I said that I'm interested in investigating what a casting process looks like when we really care for and prioritize the care of Black, Indigenous, and POC individuals, but also at the same time, they were also mindful of the data out there that keeps disproportionately hiring women and queer folks as well.
Thank you so much for that, Victor and Natasha. I wanted to follow up, Victor. I know that many of our students will kind of recognize the dynamic that you're referring to. Brooklyn College itself is a predominantly white institution that has experienced its own racial reckoning over the past summer, and a lot of the ongoing protests and drive for change has come from some of the students in this chat. I also myself have moved through the world with a lot of privilege, almost all of it kind of unearned, thanks to being a straight white guy. And I wondered if you were to speak to the students who have moved through predominantly white experiences in a predominantly white institution that's supposed to be a training ground for theater professionals and who already have some scars from that experience. What advice do you have for them as they navigate this landscape and as they move into the industry?
Yeah, I think I'll keep this short and say that I think that you're expert in your experience, right? And that educators, I think that the way that the actor has been trained for such a long time has been to be neutral and to be a white canvas upon which you can paint character onto, right? And I think that that's not, I don't think that all actors can fit into that sort of square. I think that that training is very much for white students, right? And I say that because training has not allowed a Black woman to play more than just a Black woman, right? Training has not allowed a South Asian man to play more than just a South Asian man. Has not allowed a Latino to play more than just a Latino. When folks see a Latino, they say, "Oh, well, how did this Latino guy get there?" I have questions, right? And it's just not fair. And so I think that we have not afforded the same leisure to actors who are non-white. And I think a lot of the training right now, obviously there's a lot of pivots that need to be made, but I think that actors need to take it into their own hands as well and say that your identity is important to you, but also that the way that you are imagining your capacity, your range, your skill set, that it's okay if the way that you imagine yourself is different than how others imagine you, right? That discrepancy might be real throughout your career, but it's your job to be determined to continue to be who you are in this world and then let everybody catch up. Last example that I'll share in that one, Mahershala Ali, who I just talk about all the time. Mahershala Ali was cast right out of school. He came to school here in New York for acting, and right out of his program, he was cast as a lead role in a major play at Arena Stage 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago. And it was his first lead role out of school, out of training. It was another sort of almost 2 decades before he started landing major leading roles again, right? Because the world did not see Mahershala Ali as he saw himself. Now we do, right? But it took a while. And so that's one of my messages to everybody, is to like, just persevere with how you know yourself.
Can I add a little bit onto that? I just want to say, there's real power in creating your own spaces also. I mean, creating your own spaces and then focusing on the art, focusing on the work that you are able to do once you have a safe space, and a brave space, and then to keep trying to find more collaborators, more partners, folks who like excitingly challenge you while respecting you. Like I love that Victor created this organization. When you came out with this, I was like, this is exactly the type of thing we need more of. And the multiplicity of that we need is so important too. There was for a little while we were doing this thing. Oh God, I'm literally forgetting the name of it, even though I was part of the POC Theater Industry Happy Hour. I think that's what it was called. Victor, I think that's where we first met, actually. Yeah, and it was a way that I wanted to make sure that all of us who are folks of color on the other side of the table from artists, whether or not we also identified as artists, knew each other and weren't just in silos, because that happens so much. That happened my entire career until more recently. And it really kept me from understanding what I could actually do in these spaces. So being in one space together kind of opened up a lot of that. And it made me develop more relationships with the folks who are at these like various institutions, organizations, starting their own organizations, and then dream together. And all of this happens over time, right? Things don't happen right away. So to really be able to have time to develop that means having a space to be able to do that and to be able to put your finger on what you need. So finding what you need, I think, is one thing that anyone at any level right now could do, and just try to find people who feel like they're after something that's similar to what you're after. And then you can really get into the work of it rather than having to, I mean, there are definitely these frustrations and things that are just obviously completely unfair to deal with right now. But I think alongside that, if you can find a way to really dig into the art and the part of it that brought you to theater, it's also just very like healing and helpful to keep doing and remind yourself why you're here and what you want to move towards, so that hopefully one day you do get, cast in that role or whatever that moment is. You're like ready for it as much as you can be.
Natasha, I was just reminded, I'd love to follow up with you. Something that I find really inspiring about the work that you do and have done, particularly at Signature Theater, is making that amazing lobby into a space where people who don't always feel invited into that space, where they feel at home, where they feel like there are events that that they're invited to, that they want to attend. For example, the last production that I think both of us worked on before the pandemic was Cambodian Rock Band, which I assistant directed under Che Yu. And I don't know how many Asian American AAPI theater nights did we have during the run of that?
We had 5 at the end of it, which is crazy. And the last memory I have, I actually just cleaned out my desk yesterday at Signature, which was so surreal. But while I was there, the Cambodian Rock Band, the thing that looks like wrapping paper that everyone would take their pictures against, is still up. And it was so crazy to see this completely empty space, because we did the lobby, we opened the lobby for protesters back in June, and all the furniture is out of there. So if you've been to Signature Theater, there's nothing in there right now. But that's still up there. And in my mind, I could just like see the space populated with all of the folks, all the Asian American folks who came to see that last Asian American night performance of Cambodian Rock Band, which was the night before lockdown, and it was just so crazy the way a space shifts given like human energy. It just felt like a completely different planet. And yet I was right there. It was just, it was wild. But I mean, that space is a public space, right? And there's always sort of like tangential public spaces by theaters. And I mean, that one is, I think, the biggest in New York City, and it's really special. But that was really important to me, to sort of shift what the priorities and the rules of the space are for various events, so that it's not created for the traditional older white audiences. They can come too, but let's center more people and in different ways, so that other folks are comfortable coming in, not just, oh, great, we're allowed in, but also like comfortable and wanting to come in. So like, for example, we did that, the Cambodian Rock Band sneak peek of songs in January, I think, while we were still in rehearsals. And that was really to get the Asian American community especially, but really anyone, to come into that lobby for this free event, to hear this music. So we want to remove as many barriers as possible. The space is also fully accessible. So it's just to remove all those things. And then also I really wanted to have food there, and it was hard to figure that out. But I was like, Asian people, we want food. I need to have food at this event, otherwise they're gonna take my card away. So there's like a Cambodian sandwiches spot nearby that the cast loved too. So I was like, check. And so we just got like 50 sandwiches, and I just blast out into the world like, we're gonna have these sandwiches. And people came in like the first 10 minutes, they were all gone. And that meant that like 100 sandwiches, because we split them in half, 100 people were already in the space. So just like think about what happens when those priorities are shifted, and you really genuinely make room for more people to come in by changing the rules, which means an active, intentional step and choice, but it opens up so much opportunity, and it's just fun. I just don't understand. Yeah, it's just more fun to be responsible to a lot of different communities.
Thank you for that. That's beautiful. I wanted to ask, we're going to invite the students in to join us in a few minutes, but I wanted to ask, I think that you answered this question in part, Natasha. Well, both of you have touched on this question. I think the main question, if you're a graduate of a BFA or a BA or an MFA program, you're just entering the industry or had hoped to, one question is just, what should I be doing? It's I feel like it's a disorienting time, because it's not as if there are no opportunities. There's lots of Zoom pop-ups happening all the time. There's ways to get involved. And I think creating your own space and cultivating your own practice is really important. But also, I run out of words. It's like, what should we be doing if we are BFA graduates? I'm a recent MFA graduate, so also I'm interested in this question, but specifically for our young students who are listening and actors,
I'm also recently a graduate of a graduate program, so I'm right there with you. No, I'll go first and say that I think that this moment in a lot of ways is serving or acting as a portal, and we're almost being forced to walk through. And so I'm inviting everybody to really consider the transformation that this portal requires of us as a country, as an industry, and as individual. And I am both heartbroken and hopeful at the same time, right? Because while we are seeing some of the real harm that has been done, right? Like, I'm talking specifically to actors, right? Like, seeing the harm that has been done to actors, seeing the way that hierarchically producers, directors, writers, organizations have sort of delegated the actor to the bottom rung, essentially, right? That the actor is not of value until they are valuable to a team or an organization, right? And so for me, I think for actors, if you're listening here, for the BFA actors in this program, I like to remind you of your power. This moment, if anything, we are turning this sort of like pyramid upside down, and you are now at the top. And I want to make sure that you know that you have agency to declare who you are. And if somebody else has got a problem with that, they're not your people. Next, right? And that that now with the industry, both TV, film, and theater, or all three actually, that I hope that when they welcome you to projects, that they see you for your whole humanity, or that even if you're just invited to audition, that they see you for your whole humanity, right? And that you don't leave heartbroken from that process. So I think right now, all I want you to do is take care of yourself, to really practice self-care, because we're going to need you once, the doors fling open, and you're going to be the first ones out, because you're going to be auditioning and, trying to populate all these roles that are going to come up on all sort of avenues. And so I just want you to be ready, get everything ready. Think about this time as a launch pad. Think about this as a tool belt. Like, what tools do you need to add to your tool belt? What do you need for your launch pad, so that when we're allowed to go back out into the world, and you're allowed to audition, we're allowed to go see theater again, we're allowed to be out and not worry about the harm that we could do someone else, that in that moment that you feel activated and you feel ready to go. So right now, I think it's all about prep work. It's and in that prep work, I just remember that you have power.
Thank you so much for that inspiring answer. And I just have I have one more question, and this is about really some of the leaders who continue to, we're still in an industry that is dominated by white people in positions of leadership. There have been some kind of cracks in that facade, notably, Sahim Ali and well, there have been two people of color elevated to associate artistic director roles at the Public Theater, but it can, there are other examples, but it continues to be mostly white artistic directors. And I think we often think of them as people, like, we think of artistic directors as like all-knowing geniuses, or maybe we don't, but there's a sense that they have all this power. Do they know what they're doing? Like, how are they thinking about the future? How are people at the tops of these organizations making projections? Like, when do we expect to open back up? I don't know. Does anybody know? Yeah, Natasha, I want to throw this to you. And what? Yeah, that's great.
Sure. I mean, like, since lockdown, there have been so many different scenarios of the upcoming productions when they're happening. And I mean, just going through the minutia of trying to figure out when we're producing something and what slot this many times is so crazy making because I mean, as a producer, I do love organizing and details like that. Those are definitely things that I do love. Um, but when it comes to like the herding cats part of producing, if I don't have like the core inspirational, artist driven, being at first preview, having opening night, not for the opening night of it, but just like the hugs from everyone, like all that kind of stuff. To not have that and yet to go through the minutia over and over again is a bit like dulling to my brain and to everything. But so that's what we were doing for a long time. Again, I haven't been at Signature for about a month and a half now, which is crazy. And I haven't started at Playwrights Horizons yet. So I am in this weird no man's land right now. But I imagine it's a lot of still figuring out when we could actually produce and in what way, what other measures are happening. I mean, there were entire meeting series happening at Signature about how to literally identify every single little thing that we'll need to do in order to do it safely, to open the theater safely, meaning both the shows, backstage, the staff, the audience coming in, the fact that we have that lobby, which is amazing, but is sort of now also a weapon because there's so much like it's made for orchestrated collisions. That's how it was conceived. And yet now that's sort of a scary thing. So really trying to imagine all of that. Is a lot. And so I guess it's changed a lot as we ebb and flow into like different focuses during this pandemic, during this year. And for right now, I'd say that this moment in general, I feel like is a lot about a thoughtful pause, about prep, like Victor was talking about, processing, about developing forward and like innovating and really trying to embrace a lot of the opportunities that this gives. Um, so I guess I like the broad thing that I would say is I encourage folks to think on that and how whatever you want to accomplish might align with that as one way forward, which is hard. I totally understand it's hard. So I also don't want to be like, there's an obvious answer. There's a pandemic. This country does not know how to get it under control. And so it's very difficult. But yeah, just trying to, I think the self-care that Victor was talking about is really important. I'm trying to think about that for myself as well, to be like, oh, this is not a thing I ever focused on for myself in my entire career. And that was bad. Like I burnt out many times and I'm sort of always on the brink of it. So how do I not do that? How do I like sustain this as I also move into this position that's been sort of my dream role for a very long time, a theater that does all new plays and new musicals? That's literally what I do. And how do I move into that role in as ready a state as possible? So listen to what Victor said before, because he is right.
Well, hearing you talk about your future in the American theater makes me so excited and inspired, both of you. Thank you so much for this moderated conversation. Let us move into the group discussion section of our time together. I invite all of the students to go ahead and turn on your cameras. And if anybody has a question, you are welcome to raise your hand. I'll call on you. And we can get this started. Do any of you have a question for our distinguished guests? Sarveen, please.
You guys said try to create your own space, continue to be who you are. I just want to know how can I find my community? How can I be in one space with people who are like me?
You know, I think so that for me, that's the one thing I always tell actors. I'm like, you gotta almost like create your own gravitational force that attracts the people that you want to work with, right? But you also got to be strategic. Like I tell folks, like, I don't know if you're asking specifically as an actor, but you know, for actors, I say, who are the people that, who are the casting directors out there, wherever it is that you want to, you know, put your roots down, whether it's LA, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, DC, I don't know, maybe it's in London, maybe it's in Canada, maybe it's internationally. Where is it that you want to call home? And then who are the casting directors that are casting projects there? And who are the writers and the directors and the producers that are working on projects there that speak to you? And who are the emerging writers and directors and producers who are making work happen wherever they're at with whatever means they have necessary, right? And that speak to you. And my whole thing is like, you got to build relationships with them as if that is your ecosystem, right? And so I don't know, you know, Sarvin, what kind of projects you're interested, but I think that for me, I sort of invite people to think about it almost like if you're creating a vision board, right? At the center is you. And then what are the things that fascinate you, that you want to work on, the kinds of projects that you want to work on, the kinds of roles that you want. Is it theater? Is it TV? Is it film? Like, what does it look like? And then find specifics, like who are the people in that ecosystem that you just gotta, like, you know, build home with, build artistic homes with, because, you know, a lot of the folks that you can meet are probably have the same visions or vision that you might have, and how can you co-create together, right? And is it a web series? Is it just a short film? Is it a big project? Is it producing your own thing? Is it finding a space and a producer and putting all the pieces together, and you know, and then you get a writer and then you're the actor in the project. So I think when I specifically say, like, you know, create your own things, that's what I'm saying. Like, not just create your own ecosystem, but maybe find the ecosystem where you will thrive.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. Really finding your people is so important. And that might feel sort of elusive right now. Like, okay, I love this theater company, but how do I get to them right now? See if they've got, you know, Zoom events happening, or like a town hall happening or something like that. And then you can reach out to them. You can reach out to other people in the chat, which is also an interesting thing because maybe they're like you and looking for folks who would be attracted to that theater company. Other ways of just sort of getting in there. You could also, I mean, this is something that I did when I was starting out, was just be really sneaky and try to figure out people's email addresses. You can sometimes like figure out the formula of an email address at a theater. I wouldn't do this just like to send a random email to someone or be like, "You're great, just want to let you know," or anything like that. But I would do it in a really sort of precise way of writing a succinct email that puts out something really gripping about you as a person, as a theater artist, as a person who wants to create story. And also saying why you were drawn to them. Like, what is there a project or something that you really loved? Say like 2 lines that are really specific and smart about that. When I get an email like that about a show that I've done, if it actually talks about something specific, I feel so guilty for not answering that email. I will answer all those emails. So basically guilt trip people into getting to know you. And then later on, they'll want to know you anyway because they'll already know you and they'll know what you're into, and they'll be like, yes, let's talk about this play or that play. And when you find folks, you can, you know, find different ways to get into, for now, a Zoom room and just talk about it. You know, just have like a couple structured questions and then be loose within that, to just have a way of getting to know people on an artistic level, the people you want in the room on an artistic level.
Can I just add one last thing to that? Because I think there's so many different ways to do this, right? There's so many different ways to find your people, to build community, to there's like in our industry, there is no one way to do it right? Everyone has their own way, and that's the right way. And one of the things that I just want to like always tell actors, when I say that you've got power, I mean that quite literally. Like, you can create your own things create your own projects, and then somebody else is going to come knocking on your door, right? So it's however you want. It's like, what's your vibe? Do you like knocking on doors, or do you want people to come knock on your door, right? Like, make a choice, put it on your vision board, and then go, right?
I love that. Those are fantastic answers. And I just wanted to, was inspired by something that Victor said. There's a difference between, like, when you say create your own gravitational pull, remember, I don't think, nobody starts out, you don't have to immediately feel pressure to be the sun, right? I think it's about cultivating a curiosity about yourself. And that's why I love the word discover. We're discovering what fascinates us, what inspires us, because like it could start really small, but it's these small gestures that now we kind of have some freedom to do. Like, I'm teaching myself to make short films, and nobody's seeing them, but like, I'm learning filmmaking by doing it, and I'm really fascinated by it. So anyway, that's great. Thank you, Angela. Catherine, come on down.
Okay, it's good. All right. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I feel like I really learned a lot, especially coming from people who look like me, who, you know, are about the same deal that I am, like, who want to use their art as advocating, you know what I'm trying to say. My question is, okay, so in terms of making connections with casting directors, okay, so you guys said a lot about that, but in particular, what kind of stood out to me was making your own ecosystems and like building your connection, building your community. So what advice do you have when, let's say, the community that you want to be a part of may not have emails, may not have websites, may just be word of mouth, or having the connection to lead you into that room? You know what I mean? Like, you don't know anyone in the room, so therefore you can't be there. So what advice would you give for that? And what do you guys see when you are casting people? I know people say, be yourselves, bring your 100% authentic you, but sometimes maybe social media plays a part in it, like how many followers you have. I've had that issue come up a lot of times. Like, do you have any hype around you? Are you a big name? So what advice do you give for actors who are trying to combat that and trying to get their self seen and heard in these rooms?
That's a great question. You know, I think to start off with your first one, I think one of the things I want to stress is like what you said about access, right? About how do you sort of like even get, like, if that community doesn't have email, or they don't like respond to emails, like meaning that they might be so far removed from you that you're sort of like having to invent a whole new path to get there, because no one like you has ever charted down that path, or no one like you has ever dared to dream to knock on their door, right? And that's cool. Like, that is a vision. And listen, I know, because that was me too, right? Like, nobody opened a door for me. I was like, I'm just gonna make my space here. I'm gonna keep going and find my way, right? So I think that what I want to like share with you is like, we don't know how long that journey is going to take for you, right? And we should not expect, then this is for all actors, we should not expect that your journey might sort of lead you to however you define success instantly, right? There is no instant gratification when you are an actor. And my message here is that if it is the thing that you know you have to do, then you're gonna have to do it for the rest of your life. And if it takes you 10 years, If it takes you 20 years, if it takes you 30 years, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Heck, if you can have a career like Cicely Tyson by the time you're 70, that's okay. You know, like that's okay. But I think for me, it's like, it's about your determination, your grit. Like one of the factors that I look into actors the most is their grit, right? And if you've got that, you can figure it out. And so, you know, one of the things that I do want to say, just, you know, and is it Angela? Yeah. Angela, as you navigate this conversation with yourself, you can go to my website, go to xcastingnyc.com. There's a free resource that I have that actors can download. It's under the resources tab, and it's a list of all the casting directors that cast for TV, film, and theater in Los Angeles, New York, and London. And the reason I created that is because, you know, when it comes to actors, there was no transparency. It was sort of like this, you know, figure your life out, figure out your path without a flashlight, without a plan, without a strategy. Like walk in the dark, and if you hit something, cool, you made it. But if you don't, then good luck, right? And so for me, the reason that I provide that information that you can just download is that you can now make a plan, right? Print it out. It's a lot of pages. Print it out, take a pencil and circle all the people that cast the things that you want to work on. If you want to work on horror films, guess what? You're going to figure out how to get in front of casting directors who cast horror, TV, or films. And you're going to spend a year, 2, 5, 10 trying to figure out how to get in front of them, right? How to audition for them and how to tell them, like, I'm an actor, I'm really cool, I'm amazing, I know that. I just now have to get you to see it, and we're gonna be friends. And it might take you 3 years to call me in for another audition, but that's okay because I'm a professional and I show up, right? And so, like, it's all about your attitude, your determination, your grit, but you got to have a strategy. And that's why for me, like, get that resource and just make a plan, make a road plan.
Thank you so much. I felt that.
I'll also say, you know, if there's like, if you're trying to meet, say, the artistic director of a theater as like one example, and you don't know the artistic director, do you know someone who works in marketing? Do you know that artistic director's assistant? Do you know anyone else at the theater? Do you know someone who is like 4 degrees removed? This is another way that I feel like I was very sneaky starting out because I was like, I don't know anyone here, but I would like to know you all. No one cared in the beginning. So I would just sort of try to inch my way closer. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But as long as it can be a process that isn't like weighing on you too much, I do think it's like one way to get closer to some folks and get to know them. And then they know that you're serious about this. And they're often like, oh, wow, you really care about this that much that you wanted to do all this work to show me, you know, your passion and your talent. That means something to me. So it gives you an opportunity. So just want to throw that out there too.
I just want to say that what Natasha is saying is brilliant, spot on, and it translates exactly the same to casting as well. When you, if you can't get to the casting director, get to the assistant, get to the associate, get to the interns. Why? Because guess what? They're going to be promoted within a year or 2 or 3 or 4. And then in 5 years, they're going to be the casting director. But you've already built a relationship with them where you invite them to come see you at your shows, or you send them updates every like once or twice a year just to update them on, like, you know, new things that you've done for your career or your artistry. And then now you've got, you know, some sort of connection. And as Natasha says, if you can't go from the top, go from every single way you can. So yeah, different strategies.
Thank you, guys.
And I just wanted to shout out, speaking of interns and people who are coming up in the casting industry, Victor is also training a cohort of BIPOC young casting associates through the broader Racial Justice League. So continuing to help kind of change the game so that in the years ahead, when you walk into an audition, the person behind the table, the people behind the table won't just be white, which is really important. And also the ethos of the person sitting behind the table will be more in alignment with what you all stand for. So more questions. Yeah, Charles Fenner, please. Oh, and then we'll get to Ray. Thank you, Ray.
Hi guys, thanks again for doing this. The advice that you've given is just gems. But perfect segue to what Graham was alluding to. I have two questions tailored to you both. The first one is for Victor. Like, I know my cohort, we all have like different experiences, especially with our training, but I wanted to ask you, because primarily you guys work is in anti-racism. How do you navigate a room of white casting directors and or artistic directors reading for a role or for a person of color? I think that was one of the challenges that I face, and I'm sure my ensemble members could speak to their own personal experiences of having to read for a role. And you've already mentioned in NYC how there's hundreds of casting directors that aren't of color, but going into a room and reading a role of color and coming with your own experience and how they interpret that, and also living in a world where, you know, you talk about Hollywood and theater, there's a perpetuation of stereotypes and things of that nature, and then having to go into a room to do a role of color in front of people who aren't of color. What advice would you give to those actors? Because we can't always have our ideal audition setting, but how do you go into that space knowing these things and still be able to bring yourself but feel confident in that work? Because we don't get to always choose who we want to work with, and not to say that anybody that we choose to work with is the best. We don't know, we're all learning. But what advice would you give to that?
Yeah, you know, I wish I had like a magic wand that I could just say like that'll never happen again, but that's not possible, right? Meaning that you will never be harmed again in an audition room. And you know, harm can look like a comment made about you, the way you look, about the way you're doing it, if you can make it more this or more that. You know, there's so many different comments that are made offhandedly that are insulting, right? That are degrading, that are racist. And I don't have an answer to like what you do in that scenario, but I hope that you remember that you have power and that you don't have to take it, and that you can say, time out. I don't think that's an appropriate question, but thank you. You know, I don't know what it is, like how you carry yourself in that, but I hope that you have the power to shut it down. I hope that you remind yourself that it's okay, that you don't have to take it simply because you think it's worth the job, right? Because there's many casting directors, and I just want to like turn the sort of like angle to look at the other side of this and say that there's a lot of casting directors that are amazing, that are some of the kindest people that are currently like asking themselves how they can be better about their jobs, how they can make their spaces more inclusive and open. And that work is happening right now. And I have faith that we will see a change in the next year or two, right? But also that there are Black women casting directors that are leading major studios, that it is not rare. And I also don't want you to think that it's going to be impossible for you to walk into an audition and for you to see a Black woman sitting at the center of that table, because that's happening right now, right? It just like, you're going to have different experiences because every casting process is different. Every audition is going to be different. But I just hope that those moments where you come in and you have a great experience, right? That those moments that you remind yourself that that is why you do this. And that when the moment comes that somebody might harm you, that you don't have to take it, that there's different ways that you can hold that person accountable, right? And one practical way that you can put in your pocket for later is if you go to the Casting Society of America website. So Casting Society of America, and you see the little search engine on the right corner. If you type in the name of the casting director that did, said some BS, type in their name, press search, and see if they're a member of the CSA. If they are, you're going to take the email of the CSA, which is the info@CSA or something like that, or castingsociety.com, or I can't remember what the email is, but it's on the website. And you're going to email them a report of the harm that that person did to you. And you're going to say, this person is a member of your organization, and I want to file a harm report because I would like for you to hold your member accountable. Because that's not your job as an actor. Your job as an actor is not to, put your career on the line. You can, have the Casting Society of America hold that casting director accountable. So if that happens in the future, just know that that is one possible thing that you could do. Okay.
And my last question for Natasha, I am a big fan of Signature, but I'm becoming an even bigger fan of Playwrights Horizons because of the work that you guys are doing. Speaking of networking, I've networked with some of the people that are at Playwrights, and congratulations. But out of curiosity, I want to know the work that you're doing around anti-racism. Do you plan to bring that to Playwrights Horizon? And also, what is your vision? Is it the same as it was at Signature, or is it different? Well, I'm just very curious to know what your vision is going into this to Playwrights.
Oh, well, thank you for asking that. And yes, I'm very excited to be at Playwrights. In terms of the anti-racism work, I didn't call it anti-racism work when I started in the industry, but it was always sort of embedded and then sort of emboldened and then given more muscle, I guess. And then as I worked my way into different positions, I was able to shine a spotlight on it in different ways and create multiple spaces. I'm like a big believer in theater as a landscape, and I don't think any single organization or theater is going to solve all of this. I think it's everyone all together making good decisions and better decisions, and then even greater decisions, and dreaming forward and always developing forward. I mean, we should be pushing the cultural needle. That should be what we do all the time. So for me, that's always sort of embedded in everything I'm doing. I don't even know how to go into a space and not bring that lens into it, right? And I hope that's how everyone becomes and develops. Many of us are like that because I don't know how to separate that part of me from theater. The reason I got into theater was really connected to what I feel the power of storytelling is, and doing that in person and live with the human beings next to you also experiencing the same thing. I mean, there's such power there that I fell for so early. And I was like, how can you use this power for good? How can you actually show folks different perspectives and show them communities at a different angle than what they usually see? How can you get them invested in the emotional life and in the relationships and in like community dynamics that they may not already know, or maybe they do know and they see something surprising that they don't have access to because of their position in the actual world. Like all of these things, I think, are ways to really demolish some of what is clearly very, very messed up in our country. And so for me, that will always be pulled into Playwrights Horizons, wherever I am, really. And for me, it's always been getting to know a pool of artists from historically oppressed communities, always, because we need to know a lot. As producers, I think especially, I think it's everyone's responsibility to get to know pools of artists, not just having one Latinx designer, one Black playwright, one South Asian actor. That's not okay. Even if that person's your favorite, actor, playwright, whatever, that's insane. And it's exciting to get to know more people. So I think getting to know pools of people and then knowing artistically which performers, which writers, which directors are right for the right story, for the right project, for the right program, that's really exciting to me, and that's, I think, where a lot of this plays in. So yeah, for me, it's a lot about honing and developing processes that are built for artists who are not cis white men. I think so many of the processes have been built already for that demographic. They're great. They know what to do. That's cool. So now for everyone else and for other kinds of storytelling, like for a story that isn't a living room play where the baby dies and the family's on a couch, like how do you do that really, really well? I think in the past couple of years there have been like a few more opportunities for plays that are not that, in the wake of these like diversity conversations and whatever, but the processes haven't been changed. Those folks have just been dropped into the same model, and then if they fail or if they just aren't as exciting as whatever blank living room play happened that like did really well, that speaks poorly about it makes that play and that playwright and that team of artists seem like they're not as good, which is horrifying to me because they're not being supported well. So my whole thing is really wanting to find new ways forward to fully and appropriately support different kinds of artists, different kinds of storytelling, and never making it like a one size fits all kind of thing. But really, really thoughtfully talking through the dramaturgy of a work and through the generative artists' desires for it, and for everyone in the team coming into it, what their perspectives kind of shape along the way. That's what's so special about theater. I really want to take all of that together and develop a whole bunch of new processes so that no one has to be sort of plugged into something that isn't even made for them and they won't succeed in, which is just, I mean, putting someone in the spotlight in that way and then being like, oh, look, I guess they weren't good enough is just heartbreaking to me and so unfair. And so finding new ways forward in that way is, I guess, one way to to say what that vision is. But I'm also just excited to see what else happens and how to combine art and community more, because I think that separation has been the reason for a lot of theater's downfall in the past many years.
Well, I'm sorry, Victor, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, can I just add that I think, what is so profound about what Natasha is saying is that there's like an investment, right? There's an active investment being made into these communities where that investment might not have been there before, or that investment might have been there as a one-off, right? Like, I think that example of like, we only give, or institutions have given playwrights of color, designers of color, et cetera, that one shot to succeed. And then when they don't, they move on to the next, right? And they say, that didn't work out. That person does not serve me anymore, right? And I think that is, that's also very similar to the way I think about actors. It's like, we have to be very careful with the way that we almost fail to give people of color a second chance, right? Or the benefit of the doubt. And one of the things that I'm always like, it's sort of like a trick of the trade for me that I've learned, is when I hear somebody talk about an actor of color or a Black actor and say that person's problematic, I go, tell me more about the project. Who directed it? Oh, so it's a white director. And who's the writer? Okay. And then tell me about who was on set, or who's in the process, or who was in rehearsal. Was the stage manager also white? Got it. Okay, so the actor was problematic. All right, right? But I hear that and I go, no, it's all of you who are the problem. And you created a harmful atmosphere for this one actor, and it was almost impossible for them to succeed. And so the problem is not the actor, the problem is the system, right? So every time I hear an actor is problematic, I always investigate, because I do not trust the people that say the actors are problematic. Now, there are some actors who are not nice, and we gotta figure that out. But for the most part, it is more often that we need to give the benefit of the doubt to artists of color. And I think what Natasha's saying is like fundamental when we're talking about investments.
I just want to say thank you. You don't even know me. This is my first time meeting you. That's all I have to say is just thank you for that.
Thank you. This has been really beautiful. All right. Ray, you had a question before, and then Tabs. And yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so much was just covered there. I'm sort of still swimming in it. But I also wanted to say, now that you've mentioned, I can't resist emails that ask about a very specific thing or talk about a specific thing. I want to thank you for being a part of Disgraced, because my grandfather's Palestinian and he married an Eastern European Jewish woman. And I've been in this time where I have so much time to think and overthink and square my existence. That play keeps coming up in my mind, and it's one of the first time that I got to see a story like mine on a stage, of like seeing someone struggle with that identity of being Jewish, but also being a person who comes from an older tradition, who's heard Arabic being spoken in their household. And I think that that's the American experience in a way, that a lot of us live these bisected identities that are both transnational and first generational, and that's something that I don't see in the theater a lot. And there are so many people in my class that are first generation. And I want to see more stories like that on stages. And it comes back to something that when I was digging through your Instagram, Mr. Vazquez, I saw the quote, "Silence is luxurious." And that just struck me, because not only am I'm an actor, but I've studied playwriting at Brooklyn College, and I'm trying to navigate being like queer and but also white, and in this moment where I know what a voice and a person who looks like me can do and take up space in a harmful, negative way. And I want to use my voice in the industry in a way that empowers people who don't look like me, who don't get those stories told. So there are so many challenges in walking that line. And you both mentioned prioritizing equity in the theater moving forward. So what are some practical practices that you can recommend for us as artists, us as future collaborators, us as theater makers, us as writers and future directors?
Natasha, do you want to go first, or do you?
Go for it if you got
Cool.
some.
That is a big question. That's why I was like, Natasha, do you? Let me see. I think what I'm hearing is before even the sort of advice is the story you shared and the connection you shared and the questions you shared, right? That you are asking yourself in this moment. And I think all of us are asking questions of ourselves, right? Even me, I am first generation. My parents are immigrants from Mexico. Spanish is my first language, and I am a light-skinned Latino, right? I'm also cis, gendered, and there are privileges that I even acknowledge within myself in the spectrum of this country, right? And I think that what is important is that we identify where we exist in our privileges and how we can either step aside to make more room or use the tools we have to make sure that we are leading justice-driven efforts, right? And I think in this moment, my advice to folks, particularly to actors, is that it's okay if your politic is in alignment with your art, and if those two things cannot be divorced, right? And it's okay if you are interested in making sure that the projects that you dedicate your time to, that you put your body into, that they're in alignment with your politic, right? And that means something different to everybody, right? But I would even venture to say, Ray, that even, you communicated earlier on that you identify with she, her, and they, them pronouns, correct? Right? And even then, in the queerness of it all, right? I identify as a queer individual as well. I'm gay, and I think that there's a lot of there are injustices that you too will have to reckon with because of your gender and because of your spectrum of gender and your spectrum of denying a binary, right? And all that to say is, like, I think my advice is that there is no one way, no right path. There is no sort of like universal definition for success, and that you have to find and define what success means to you and what kind of projects fuel you, what kind of projects nurture you, right? And if they are what somebody else would consider small, hey, guess what? It's your nurturing, not theirs. If it's what somebody else considers totally out of bounds and impossible, hey, guess what? It's what nurtures you. It's not what nurtures them, right? So I just say trust your voice, even as Graham said that discovery is important. Allow yourself the time to discover that.
Yeah, I think also know that you're gonna evolve, right? Like this is like maybe not a starting place, but a space that you're in right now, and then that'll move forward. And then, I guess hopefully it's an evolving space, right? Like I feel like everyone is always intaking more information, learning more, has the ability to see more, to understand more perspectives, and that will shift things in yourself, and just being open to that, and while also simultaneously holding on to what's like the most important to you, will lead you in directions that are really interesting, and really you and really right for you, and just really connecting the values you've got to the art you make. So I don't really think that should ever be separated, because then I guess what are you doing it for, and why does it mean so much to you? So while it can be difficult sometimes to do that, or you get pushback or things like that, I think always keeping in mind why you're doing something, why it's important to you, and then going into the weeds of like, oh God, what do I have to do to make sure I do this thing right logistically or whatever, that's going to happen. But I think sort of knowing that you have the anchor of like, this means something to me, or even if it doesn't mean something to you, maybe it's a stepping stone to something else that you want to get to, and that you need to fulfill some other step in order to get there. And like then what it really is it's a tool. It's a tool for your toolbox, so that when you're there, you have everything you need. So just keeping in mind why you're in various spaces is really important. And then also I think there's like a conflict that sometimes comes up where it's a choice between an opportunity and values, and that gets really tricky, right? Because it's like, well, I need the opportunity in order to get to a space where I can do more and I can enact those values in some way. And so that's just really hard. So I would just sit with it. Sometimes I guess, there are definitely times in my past where I feel like I could have said more or done more. And now I think about it and I'm just like, I hate that so much. And I feel like I didn't have power then. So why say anything? Like I'll just talk to my friends after, or I'll say something silently, like that sort of thing. But really think about what could happen if you use your voice, and also if you use your voice with others around you. and what that can do for also the people who are coming up behind you as well, which I think is always something to think on. So I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but it's a good question to ask.
This has been a fantastic conversation, and out of respect for our guests' time, I know that we have other commitments even late at night in this pandemic, but I want to that's a great note to end on, that the work of integration of our values with our artistic practices continues. It's ongoing and it's constantly evolving. And I love thinking of this, in spite of all the challenges that we're facing and all the difficult things that are going on in the world right now, as a new beginning and a portal, as Victor said. So I just want to, and I want to tell the students, it's so wonderful to hold space again with you. It's been a while since we've all been together, and this has been really special. And Victor and Natasha, thank you so much. This has been absolutely inspiring and rigorous and thoughtful and really wonderful. And Patrick, did you want to? All right.
I just wanted to jump in and thank you all so much. Your words about creating community and about really moving towards anti-racism and all the work that we do. And I'm so honored that I can be part of your community now, and that Brooklyn College is this launching pad for all of us. And I don't want you all to leave us. You are all now an extension of our community and our family. And this work towards anti-racism, I don't ever want us to think of it as a compromise in our art. It's an enrichment of our art. And I know when we're out there and we're fighting the fight and, we're asking to include more diverse voices, sometimes in the back of their heads, they're hearing, yeah, we should do these guys a favor and include some more diverse voices. Don't let that creep into your imagination, because what we're doing is enriching the landscape of our stories. And I'm just so honored to be sharing this space with you. And for our guests, you are an inspiration, and I am not going to let you out of our gravitational pull. You are now part of the Brooklyn College community and family, and we're going to hit you up again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everybody. And that's it. That's all, folks. Good night. We'll see you, everybody, back tomorrow. We're going to be having a conversation with MacArthur Genius Grant winner Luis Alfaro, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And that promises to be incredibly inspiring. El Maestro Luis. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and good night.